He's a keynote speaker, corporate trainer, and author, and he serves as the Director of Consumer and Communications Research at Procter & Gamble.
Well, speaking of resources, the author of a new book has compiled some resources to help you grow your company and your company's leadership.
Please join me in welcoming Paul Smith to the stage.
Our favorite storyteller. We'd like to introduce the one, the only, Paul Smith!
It's pretty high expectation with that cheer. I like that. So this is my favorite part of the event, not just because it's almost over, but because I get to the honor of reflecting back on a couple of days and sharing. His brother sells rectangular tables. That's the best answer I think I've ever heard. I like that. I'm gonna write that down. Telling people a story, and the conclusion is, if you want to be successful, get lucky. That's not very helpful. So experience is always the best teacher, but story is a close second, and everything else is a distant third. And of course, I have to start by telling you a story.
Welcome back to Good Morning Arkansas, live look on our high-definition Milton heat and air camera across West Little Rock. We want to welcome Paul Smith. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Normally you think of leadership and your boss is telling you what to do,
right?
But you have a unique way of going about this.
So for example, a colleague of mine that's a consumer researcher like me back in the 80s, he was working on a brand of cooking shortening, so like Crisco that would come in those big tubs, you remember those?
Oh yeah.
And so they were trying to figure out why people were still buying lard and cooking with lard when it was been proven over and over again that shortening is much better for you. And so they were interviewing this one woman, and she said something that just surprised them. She said, well, I know that shortening is healthier, but it's better for my kids if I buy lard. And of course that made no sense to them, so he had to ask, well, why would that be? And she said, well, if I buy shortening, I can't afford to buy milk. And I got growing kids and they need their milk instead of just drinking tap water, so I buy lard and milk. Now, you can imagine Jim, my colleague, that like hit him right here, you know. I mean, it's the first time he'd really understood the difficult choices a struggling single mom has to make with the expensive price of his product. And so they interviewed hundreds of people, and I'm sure they wrote up a fancy research report with a bunch of statistics on the answers, but that story that he told about that one woman back at the office made a much bigger difference in getting people to think about, you know, maybe we should lower the price of our product than all the statistics in the research report. So stories are great at helping them make that realization. And again, here's an example where telling the story respects the audience, because you're not telling them you need to give your people more latitude. You're telling them a story and letting them come to that conclusion themselves. I've had several opportunities in my career to present to A.G. Lafley, and the first one I'll never forget. I was the first item on the agenda. I had about 20 minutes to give my pitch, and so I got there early and I set up my computer and all the AV stuff. I wanted it to be right. It was one of that round room in the executive conference room of the 11th floor. And the table's round, the walls are round, the doors are round. So I went and set up where I'm supposed to, and AG comes in, and he goes to sit down, and he skipped all these available seats out here, and he came in and he sat right back here with the screen that I was going to project on right behind him. And I thought, ew, that's not going to be good. The guy's going to be looking over his shoulder the whole time. He's going to get a crick in his neck. He's not going to be happy. He's not going to like my idea, therefore. It's just not going to go well. Well, I get 5 minutes into my spiel, and I realize the guy hasn't turned around once to look at the slides. And then I started getting worried that he's not going to understand it, and so therefore it's not going to go well. Well, 10 minutes into it, I realized he still hasn't turned around once to look at my slides, and I stopped being worried, and I started kind of getting mad. I'm like, I spent a long time on this. You could at least turn around once to look. I finished the whole thing, and he didn't turn around one time to look at my slides. And on reflection later, it occurred to me, it wasn't that he was disinterested. Okay, he was engaged the whole time looking me right in the eyes. He didn't look because he knew something that I didn't know until that day. And that is that if I've got anything important to say, I'm going to say it. He goes through, presentations like that all day long and memos and reports and all kinds of stuff. He was looking at that meeting as an opportunity to engage someone in dialogue, somebody like me. And I blew it because I was trying to present to him. What he wanted to do was to talk to somebody and have them tell him a story. So that's what I do from now on. For example, raise your hand when you know what this is. Don't say anything, just raise your hand. One person, 2, 3, a few more. Okay, let me give you guys a hint. Ah, okay. All right. That feeling you all got in the pit of your stomach when you finally got it that that's a cow, that's the feeling you want your audience to have when they get your idea. Okay? That same feeling you probably got when you came up with your brilliant idea in the first place. That helps you, you've created a little mystery for them to solve, which keeps them interested, but it also lets them go through the same dynamic discovery process that you went through when you learned it. If you do that, your idea becomes their idea. My suggestion is not that storytelling is always the best thing to do and you should never do anything but storytelling. I think that we default to our other methods of communication 95% of the time, and rarely do we in general tell stories, and I think it ought to be the other way around. Most of my stories come from my life, my work, and that's where most of your stories will come too. You know, most of you have been through situations where you saw something happen that was very compelling and it changed everybody's opinion and really made the day, and that's when the boss really accepted the conclusion and the recommendation, but you just didn't go write it down. I write them down. When those things happen, what I've realized is to be an effective leader, not only do I need to be good at telling stories, but I need to have those stories to tell. So I actually create my own little database of stories. When something really interesting happens, or I hear a great story from somebody else, if you tell me one in the hallway, I'll go write it down. And then I've got that story to come out when I need it. So like most people keep databases of all of their research or their financials or whatever, I keep a database of stories, and I think it's important for leaders to do that. If you find yourself in a leadership challenge like, well, today I've got to set a vision for my organization, or I need to coach Bob and Sally on how to work together to better, then look up the chapter on setting a vision or the chapter on getting people to collaborate better, and then 4 or 5 pages you're going to have 4 or 5 great stories that'll help you accomplish your task, and it's a proven story because it's worked at some other place.